man who kicks things off every single day on Pro Football Talk Live. Pro Football Talks, Mike Florio here to kick off hour number 2. How are you, Michael?
Doing great, Rich. How are you, pal?
I am doing well. What's going on in Jacksonville? Best you can tell right now, if we're talking.
I think that the report that we saw on Saturday from NFL media isn't the cause as much as it's the symptom of what's been going on. There are multiple people in the building that just don't care for Urban Meyer. They don't like the way he treats people, and they have been peddling stories and details and anecdotes for weeks now. It all goes back to when he didn't accompany the team back to Jacksonville after they lost that Thursday night game in Cincinnati, and regardless of whatever photos made the rounds, the key is he abandoned his post. He didn't fly with his team back to Jacksonville, and that emboldened people to begin to talk, and they've been talking, and it finally reached critical mass on Saturday, and that's really the biggest issue that they're dealing with right now. And I know he suggested yesterday whoever the source is will be unemployed. First of all, he's not going to find out who the source is. Second of all, it's not just one person. There are multiple people that are talking to the media. They're motivated to do so because they don't like him. And what the owner has to decide is how long is he going to continue this? Is he going to double down? The dysfunctional teams tend to double down when they make mistakes. The good teams either don't make mistakes at all, or when they make a mistake, they spot it, they rectify it, and they move on. But the indications are that Meyer's going to be back. I just am going to be fascinated, Rich, to see what his coaching staff looks like next year, because he hired these people. They, not all of them, but enough of them, because there's always stuff that goes on in a locker room, on a practice field, in a meeting room, and depending upon what the perspective of the observer is, it can be a big deal or not. We don't hear about that stuff. You only hear about that stuff when people don't like the guy who's in charge. That's the fundamental issue that the Jaguars need to wrestle with. There are too many people who don't like the guy in charge. What are they going to do about that going forward?
Well, it's also the players too, right? Because you can't, look, we were all wondering in the media is how Urban was going to handle losing, and how is he going to handle losses racking up that eclipse number of losses that he would suffer over a span of years or a tenure, right? These 11 losses for Jacksonville right now, 2 more than he had in his entire tenure at Ohio State. You could tell the answer to that question is not handling it well at all, or he handles it in the same way that he would handle one loss in a season. And the problem is that would be an outlier. Now it's a weekly occurrence, and that wears on people. So, the players, though, you can't fire all of them. And those are the ones who are, according to Tom Pelissero, we're talking to Rams players at the end of that loss here in Los Angeles. And that's how stuff gets out, too. Mike.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with you completely. The idea that losing a game or two now at the NFL level, it's not as magnified as it is at the college level. And I think that's how he kind of justified rolling the dice with not a great team because, hey, you lose 7 or 8 games, you're still in the playoff hunt in the NFL. Well, you lose 11 and you're done, as the Jaguars now are. But that's part of what he has to deal with. And you can internalize it or you can externalize it. And it sounds like he's spent a lot of this year, instead of holding it in, taking it out on anyone who happens to be around, because it's not his fault. It's never his fault. Nothing's ever his fault. So it must be someone else's fault, and he's, by all appearances, done what he can to put the blame on anyone that he can find to blame except himself.
So, one thing that he said he's not used to, talking about, I guess leaks and people talking about him like they talked about him, is playing out the string, which is what Jacksonville's doing now. So what happens over the next 4 weeks in your estimation? Crystal ball with any knowledge you may have about how expensive a move it would be to move on.
Well, no one knows what he's making. We reported back when he was in the market for an NFL job, he was looking for $12 million, and there was an angry reaction to that, which means he wasn't getting anywhere close to $12 million. The best number I can piece together is $6.5 per year plus some form of incentive package possibly, and that's a lot lower than what we thought an Urban Meyer would make when he makes the jump to the NFL. So I don't know what the total buyout would be, how much is guaranteed, how many years go out there, but it's a big check if you want to move on. The question becomes, what will Shad Khan do about this? And the Jaguars have a unique structure as it relates to PR. For certain things, when you ask the team for comment, they send you to the owner's spokesperson, a guy named Jim Woodcock. And so when this comes out, hey, Jaguars, what's your comment on these reports that these things happen? They send you to the spokesman for the owner, and he says no comment. And I went back and forth with him yesterday, and he eventually sent me an article recently that was published in the Florida Times-Union where Shad Khan has a bunch of different comments, and he talks about failure and dealing with failure and how he's dealt with failure in the private sector and how it's different in sports because everything's magnified. But you get the impression that he's not going to just cave in. He's not going to give in. I mean, he's got the lowest winning percentage of any owner who's had a team for the amount of time that he's had the team, 10 years now. And the total number of games, no one has been more unsuccessful than him. So I guess he's kind of used to it, and I think he is going to be inclined to double down. But, all it takes is one moment. All it takes is one thing. You never know what that straw is going to be that breaks the camel's back. And remember this year, the window opens 2 weeks early on potentially moving on from coaches and interviewing guys who are working for other teams. That's something that the league put through in October, and that could cause some teams to start firing coaches 2 weeks before we're accustomed to the coaches being fired. So the window opens not in 4 weeks from today. It opens basically 2 weeks from today.
How about that? Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's the status of Matt Nagy, you think, in Chicago? 4-9 right now. Justin Fields shows flashes when he's not hurt behind that porous offensive line. That's obviously Nagy's fault. But what do you make of his status in Chicago right now?
From one dysfunctional organization to another, and dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. So it's always hard to predict what a dysfunctional team is going to do. Right? When they trade up from number 20 to number 11, give up next year's first-round pick to get Justin Fields, I look at that and I say, okay, somebody in that organization has decided that they're going to stick with Matt Nagy for a couple of years, that they're going to stick with Ryan Pace, the GM, for a couple of years and give this kid a chance to develop, that you're not going to put everyone under a win-now mandate when you've gone all in for a quarterback that's going to take some time to get to his highest level of achievement, because if you get a new coach, there's no guarantee the new coach wants that quarterback. He may say it during the interview process, and he may convince you that he believes it, but once he's there and he's got his guaranteed contract, well, all of a sudden, maybe this guy or maybe that guy or maybe this guy doesn't really fit with the offense I want to run. So I thought that when they made the trade, Rich, it meant Nagy and Pace got 2 more years. And now, obviously, the storm clouds are building. And there was a report from CBS on Sunday that they've spoken to Trace Armstrong, who was a first-round pick of the Bears in '89 and spent 16 years in the NFL. He's in the 100-sack club. He's a successful agent now, primarily for coaches, that they've talked to him about taking over the football operations. He denied it. Ryan Day, the Ohio State coach, was linked to Armstrong, but the one thing that was overlooked in all this, he represents Nagy. So it's just one big stinking mess. And I mentioned that possibility of someone in charge of football operations because if they do start firing people this time around, Rich, they need to go one level higher and target Ted Phillips. He's got one of these gigs that most teams have, a person like this, who is part of the football operation, but when the poop hits the fan, they're not. And they go run for cover, and they don't get fired. So 20 years later, and a bunch of bad hires later, that person's still calling the shots. It could be that this time it goes up one level higher, and they clear out everybody and start over again.
I guess I was thinking when I heard Ryan Day's name mentioned that whoever loses the Michigan-Ohio State game is apparently rumored to be the next Bears coach year in and year out, So
I wonder if they're leaking Ryan Day to get Jim Harbaugh to be in.
I don't know about that.
That's the ultimate born on third and think you hit a triple move. And then Harbaugh says, "No, sorry, Ryan Day, I'll take that job."
So what about Ryan Day? What could he be like Jacksonville too? Because that's a possibility. I mean, what college coaches could potentially be on radar screens in the NFL right now?
The owners are very much influenced by recent history. They say that the NFL is a copycat league. I think that it's more like the owners don't know what to do, so they look at whatever's successful right now, and they say, well, I'll do the same thing. So you look at what's happening with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and the guy who succeeded him in Ohio State. Well, would you touch that guy right now if you were an owner of a team? I mean, I think of the ridicule you're going to get. Oh, well, we took the guy that Urban Meyer handed a successful program to, and he's still mostly successful, and we expect that guy to be better than Urban Meyer when, he worked with Meyer, and look at what a mess it is for Meyer. I think it's going to be hard to sell Ryan Day until Meyer either becomes successful or some other college coach who jumps to the NFL becomes successful. Matt Rhule started off 3-0, and now I think he's in trouble of being replaced.
You think so?
Well, because David Tepper, the owner of that team, is determined to get the best of everything as it relates to coach, GM, and quarterback. The Amazon series that they don't produce anymore, it was called All or Nothing.
Yes.
The year that they had the Panthers as the focal point, in the very last episode, David Tepper's riding in the backseat of an SUV, and he says the NFL is set up for all teams to be 500. And where you go above that or below that is up to you. And if you want to be above that, you have to have a great coach, a great GM, and a great quarterback. And I think Tepper has a very short fuse when it comes to up or down. Is this guy great or not great? Teddy Bridgewater, 1 year, not great, gone. Sam Darnold, half a season, not great, gone. And has he seen enough from Matt Rhule in 2 years? Look, something happened that is unusual, to say the least, to result in Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, being fired at 15 after 1 o'clock Eastern on the Sunday of their bye week, 6 days after the normal time you fire somebody when you're changing offenses or changing play callers during your bye week. So there's definitely a vibe that David Tepper may have seen enough from Matt Rhule, and he's going to move on and try to find, he wants Vince Lombardi, George Young, and Tom Brady, and he's not going to rest until he has all three.
So who else might be on that hot seat? It's interesting you point out again that the window to start interviewing candidates is 2 weeks earlier than usual. So what do you think?
Well, I think Mike Zimmer in Minnesota is a guy who's in danger, to say the least, where they are right now. It's just the same old thing. They're treading water. They're dog paddling. They've blown so many leads this year. And even though they ultimately won the game on Thursday night, that's one of those games where in the owner's box, to the extent that they are allowed to smoke cigars in there, and I assume they're not, that's where you want to light one up midway through the third quarter and just enjoy the rest of the game. Well, the next thing you know, here, oh, there's one. Oh, there's another. Oh, there's another. Before you know it, you're in another game that goes down to the last freaking play, up 29-0, and it's yet another Vikings game that has to come down to the last play. And but for Chase Claypool and the ridiculous celebration of a first down catch that took 14 seconds off the clock before they could snap it, the Steelers would have had another shot or two at the end zone. So I think Zimmer has to get to the round of 8, and I don't think he will, to come back next year. I think at this point, just getting the 7th seed and getting knocked out by the 2nd seed is not going to be nearly good enough. And because it's just, playoffs one year, no playoffs the next year, and there's no real sign of growth, no sign of progress, and no sign that he's fully in charge of the team. He's in charge of the defense, and he throws the keys to the offense to the offensive coordinator, and that's just not good enough.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. Few more minutes left with him right here on the Rich Eisen Show. So the scenario in the AFC, they're the Patriots now 2 in front of the Bills, who had their star quarterback in a just starring role. What a remarkable comeback that Josh Allen led, but it led him to be in a walking boot to leave. And then the Ravens lose to the Browns, who have an opportunity to now win this division, having split with the Browns. They've already won one with the Bengals, who have swept the Steelers and have already beaten the Ravens once, and they could wind up sweeping the Ravens too. Certainly if Lamar Jackson has some considerable time out. What do you know about the injury status of both of those quarterbacks right now on this Monday?
Well, Josh Allen downplayed his injury, but the boot isn't a fashion statement, Rich, right? He's got it on for a reason. And Kyler Murray downplayed his sprained ankle that he suffered in the next last play of the Week 8 game against the Packers, and we didn't see him for 5 more weeks. So I never trust what comes out of the quarterback's mouth or any player's mouth right after they're injured, because there's a certain amount of hard-headedness and wishful thinking that goes into it. So turf toe is what I've seen, left foot, turf toe, that's not good. And they unleashed him yesterday, unlike they have in a long time. I think after his rookie season, when he had a couple of 100-yard rushing games, they decided to be more careful with him until, like, huge games, key moments, postseason. Apparently they decided yesterday this is the moment. This is the time to switch back to southpaw and go after, a better offensive showing than what they've had. And I think Brian Daboll's in serious trouble there as well with the offense he's been running. But with Allen, it's too early to know. And with Lamar, John Harbaugh said after the game it is a sprain, and they're going to do tests today. And there's been some different opinions. Is it low ankle? Is it high ankle? Whatever. They're going to defer to the tests and figure out exactly what it is. Almost like last week with Marlon Humphrey, there was reporting that it was his shoulder. It ended up being a torn pec. You have to, in some of these, just wait and see what the diagnostic evaluation is, and then you know exactly what it is and how long he may be out. But the Ravens have just been holding it together, like one injury after another all the way back to training camp. It's amazing they're even in it at this point, and if they lose Lamar, it would be even harder for them to hold on.
Yeah, where are the long-term contracts for the starting quarterbacks in that game yesterday?
Well, I mean, Lamar should have his. The problem is Lamar represents himself. And Lamar, there was a story from Shefty, I think, week one. Lamar's too focused on football to negotiate the contract. That's all the more reason to hire an agent. I mean, whatever you save in that 2%, 1%, whatever it is, you can negotiate it as low as you want. And there's agents out there willing to do it for 1%. Whatever you save, you're going to make over that by orders of magnitude, especially if you end up getting yourself injured and you never get that big contract offered to you by your team. So he should have had his deal a long time ago. His issue isn't the team's unwillingness to do it. It's that he isn't engaged in the process with the Ravens, and they're just kind of waiting for him. For the Browns and Baker Mayfield, different story altogether. They just aren't talking because I don't think they know whether or not he's the guy.
Really? That's it, huh? I mean, it's just because they're or they just don't want the number to start with a 4 annually, right? I mean,
well, it's one or the other. It's like, hey, we'll keep you around for $30 million a year, but we won't keep you for $40 million. Or, you know what? If we're going to pay $30 million, we'll just roll the dice on somebody else. This gets back to what we talked about earlier. When do you admit your mistake? When do you admit that it's not right? When do you recognize we just have to forget what we've done and focus on what we're going to do? Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer had an article that tried to discern what Baker was talking about when he went public with Kurt Warner over the weekend and said that there are a lot of internal things that have been an issue this year. That you usually don't hear that from a quarterback. And there, by all appearances, is a lot of stuff between Mayfield and the team, and it's happening with the contract uncertainty in the background. I just don't think it ends well. And I think the Browns need to acknowledge it, and Mayfield needs to acknowledge it. I don't. Who would anyone give Mayfield something right now that starts with a 4? Rich?
No. Nor would I. But I would definitely sign him long term. I mean, like at some point, Mike, we're going to see a team do one of two things in this situation. We're going to see a team tell this quarterback, "Yeah, you were drafted first overall, and you're our guy." But we are not going to pay you top dollar just because you were drafted first overall all those years ago, certainly by somebody that wasn't me, so we're going to find a contract in the sweet middle, in the sweet middle of Jimmy Garoppolo or a little hair above what Jimmy Garoppolo got, right? Like that's what we're going to do. Or we'll do the other thing that we're still waiting for a team to do, which is we're going to draft somebody first overall. We're going to go through that guy's contract, and then we're going to start again. And we'll just do it again because we're not going to get cap strung, and we're going to try and win a Super Bowl with a new guy in his first years of his contract, which is the sweet stuff that the Chiefs were able to do and the Seahawks were able to do back in the day, and very few other teams have been able to do. Like that's what we're going to see, and maybe the Browns are they.
Hey, Rich, your lips to the football god's ears. Back in June of 2019, I was shouting as loud as I could to the Rams, "Do not sign Jared Goff to a second contract. Don't do it. Just because he's got 3 years in and he took you to a Super Bowl and he's eligible for a new deal, don't do it. Don't do it." And they were acting like I was crazy. Fred Rogan had Sean McVay on his radio show, and they're like, "Oh, that's just ridiculous. Oh, he's never going to not be here." All of the BS that we hear all the time when we're really sold heavy BS. And fine, look what you get. You pay him $33.5 million. You eventually have to offload the deal 2 years later as part of a broader trade where you hide Goff's contract in there and give up a first-round pick to get rid of Goff's contract, but it's not as conspicuous as it would be because it's part of the broader Matthew Stafford transaction. That's exactly what some of these teams need to do, and it's either see you later or, Rich, it's the creation of a second tier. For a while it was the next guy who was due a contract, who was on the pass side of pass-fail, automatically becomes the highest-paid player in league history. And it went Andrew Luck, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan, one after another. That doesn't work anymore. Hey, we'd like to keep you, but you're not getting $40 million a year. We'll keep you at $30 million a year, and otherwise, see you later. That's what somebody needs to do, and maybe the Browns will be the ones who do it with Mayfield.
Last one for you, Mike, in a couple minutes I have left here. What can you tell me about the Raiders? What's their last few weeks going to be here? Best you can tell, what are you hearing about them?
The last reporting I saw about Mark Davis and his plans for looking for a new coach is he hadn't started yet because he's focused on the postseason. Well, he's about at the point where he can forget focusing on the postseason, and he's 2 weeks away from being able to start interviewing other coaches from other teams, but it's clearly not going to be Rich Bisaccia long term. He wouldn't have had that job. He wouldn't have even been interviewed for the job. He was just at the right place at the worst possible time for Jon Gruden. And on Jon Gruden, by my calculation, unless there's been an extension informally agreed to by the lawyers, that response from the NFL and Roger Goodell to the Jon Gruden lawsuit could be landing as soon as today. It'll be very interesting to see what their next move is on this broader litigation chessboard. It's been a while, but you get a month or so, and I think today may be the day.
Now, I was going to ask you what's going on with Gruden. What are you hearing about John, about any of that stuff?
Well, just it's once it gets into the gears of formal litigation, there's a lot of delays that are baked into it, especially early on. But we're getting there, and we'll see. Now, I guess there's also a chance that they may have quietly settled it, but that would defy the rhetoric that we saw from the league. But maybe they learned their lesson with St. Louis, and they've decided to cash out of these things sooner rather than later.
Mike, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciated. Always appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Rich. Good talking to you.
You bet. That's Mike Florio. Check him out every single day on NBC Sports on Peacock to kick things off before the Dan Patrick Show, and then comes ours, and then Brother from Another. That's how we roll every single day here on NBC Sports on Peacock. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.